Okay, here we go. Welcome, everybody. My name is Nina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library. I'm really excited to be here with Chad Finn from the Boston Sports. As I mentioned, this is a hybrid program, so people are tuning in from home as well as in the room. So we'll be managing, Brenna and I will be managing the Q&A after Chad has this conversation or has his talk. And as many questions as we have time for. Well, we'd like to thank the Friends of the Ashland Public Library who support all of our programs. You can buy books from Aesop's Fable and have them signed at the end of the program because signed books are old, as everybody knows. I mean, librarians know it. I like to share with you too. And we are also doing this in collaboration with a large number of libraries, 15. I have the list on my computer and I will put it, come on in. No, that's in the, that's recorded, sorry. The other room. Yeah, so a large number of libraries. I really thank Chad for doing that because he just told me that this might be one of his last programs on this book. So he's going out with a bang. Welcome, Chad. Tell us all about yourself and let's hear this awesome book.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's done quite a few of these for the Boston Globe story, the Red Sox, which came out in March, and the real push on it was Father's Day. So a lot of these events before Father's Day. This is the first one I scheduled, and the last one I'm doing, I think, so it's pretty exciting. So really glad to be here, and
I'm going to give you this mic because that one is not, I can't hear you.
okay. Is that good? You hear it? It's hard to tell if it's me or not. Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about my background and the book, and then we can talk about whatever questions you have, or current Red Sox, or about things about the Boston Globe story, the Red Sox, or anything along those lines. But I grew up in Maine, like most New England kids. I was raised on Boston sports. My dad used to bring home a couple of newspapers every day. He'd bring home the Globe and the Boston Herald, and he liked the Globe better, so he would read the Herald first, and I would get to read the Globe. And the Globe was just the gold standard for sports writing those days. In the 70s and 80s, it was Peter Gammons and Lee Montville and Ray Fitzgerald and Bob Ryan and all these writers who became intertwined with the sports that they covered, almost part of the history. And at age 8, 9 years old, I was enamored with it. And I would read Peter Gammons' Sunday baseball notes column in the Globe and read all his trade rumors and his gossip to my dad. And my dad would be like, don't tell me, I want to read it myself. Don't tell me you're spoiling everything. So I was I should have known what a spoiler alert was, I guess, when I was 8 years old, but I didn't. And you get to that age, happens to everybody, I think, or at least 99.99% of people, where they realize they're not going to play left field for the Boston Red Sox or forward for the Celtics or whatever it happens to be that they dream of doing. And for me, that was at age 15 when I didn't get a hit in my whole second year of Babe Ruth baseball. Realized that probably wasn't something the Red Sox were going to scout. So I started thinking, what would I'm going to go to college. What would I like to do? And I wanted to be involved with sports. It's what I cared about. It was my passion since reading those newspapers at a very young age with my dad. And I decided I wanted to write for the Globe. It seemed like the best job in the world. The people had got to go to the games for free, and they got to talk to Larry Bird and Roger Clemens. Maybe that wasn't such a great experience talking to Roger Clemens, but they got to know all these great athletes and cover all these great events, and they got paid to do it. And it seemed like just the most wonderful job in the world after actually playing for one of the teams. So trained myself in doing that. I went to the University of Maine and went down to, not exactly a proactive person, but I went down to the student newspaper my first week on campus and started writing right away. And I realized that I liked it. Wasn't very good at it, but just like with anything else, repetition makes you better. And by the
time I graduated, after 5 years, I had done the sports editor for 2 years, and I covered a hockey team that was went 42-1 and won the national championship. And the star of that team, one of the stars, was Jim Montgomery, who's now the Bruins coach. And that opened up some doors, covering a team that had sort of captured national attention, and they had a bunch of guys who played on the Olympic teams, and opened the door to me to get my first job in Concord, New Hampshire in 1994. I was there for 9 years. Didn't really write very much. I was assistant sports editor, and so that entailed putting together a newspaper every day and things like that. And I only started writing a little bit later in my tenure. I missed it there. And in 2003, I got hired by the Globe as a editor, and it was my dream to work there, but it wasn't the same thing. I wanted to write. Now, the one question the sports editor asked me in my interview was, "You don't want to write, right? Because the line for that's a mile long." And I lied and said, "No, I don't. I want to write NBA roundup captions." And so I did that, and then I've been at the Globe for a year when the Red Sox won the World Series in 2004. And it was what I dreamed about writing about my whole life. The Red Sox had never won 86 years without a championship, and they win, and I don't have an outlet for it. So I started a blog, which was a thing to do in those days. My daughter had just been born. I'd get home from work at 2 a.m. every night and stay up with her and write. And I captured the attention of some people, including my editor a year later, who said, "I heard you have a blog. You're not ripping on Dan Shaughnessy, right?" And I said, "No, I'm just writing about baseball." And he said, "Okay, you can keep it." And then in 2009, a lot of outlets around Boston really added to their web coverage. A couple of TV stations launched. Greater Sportscasts, another sports radio station launched, and they looked at me, the blog boy, and said, "We're moving you to the web because we need more people over there." And so I've been writing ever since. I got promoted to a columnist a couple of years ago, and that's how I sort of came to do this book, which I feel like, as someone who has cared about the Globe and the Red Sox since I was 8 years old in 1978. I almost feel like I was sort of the ideal person to do that, to put this book together. I think a lot of people at the Globe probably feel the same way. There's a lot of sort of common background with the passion for sports and the addiction to journalism once you get into it. But I feel like putting this book together and being the person to pull all these stories from the Globe archives was sort of something I was almost sort of predestined to do in a weird sort of way. So we put the book together. I'll talk a little bit about the book because there's a lot about me, but we put the book together in about 9 months. And some of the questions I get asked, more than anything else, I think the number one question is, how did you settle on the cover? And the cover is from Koji Uehara, Red Sox closer in 2013 when they won the World Series. It was their third World Series in 9 seasons, 10 seasons technically. And a really well-liked player, but probably not someone you would say was would be regarded as a Red Sox superstar. And people would say, "Well, I like the choice. It's a great picture. But I would have thought it'd be Ted Williams or David Ortiz." And I tell you, I was, after the process we went through to decide the cover, I'm grateful with the one we ended up with, because my publisher initial choice was Chris Sale, a photo of him after the 2018 World Series when he struck out Manny Machado to end the World Series. And Chris Sale was not a popular figure as we were putting this book together. My publishers didn't really seem to recognize that until we sort of begged them to move off that a little bit, off that picture. Sale had been hurt a lot. He is again right now, and had some comments about vaccinations that alienated a pretty good portion of the fan base. So he was probably the last guy we should have been putting on the cover at that point in time. And won that argument, and I said, you know, maybe we should go with David Ortiz. And they made a good point back to me. They said, well, he's been on the cover of a lot of books. He's got 2 of his own. Several after they won in 2004, their first World Series victory since 1918, and it would probably blend in with anything else if it's another Red Sox compilation with David Ortiz on the front. I understood that. And then they said, pick out another 10 photos that you think would be good. And there are a lot of them, Ortiz and Manuel Ramirez and guys like that, Pedro Martinez. And then they sent one to me that they thought would be a good cover photo, and it was Xander Bogaerts. Beautiful photo at Fenway Park. They're wearing those yellow uniforms that they wear sometimes, the marathon ones, which probably wouldn't have been ideal for a cover, but a beautiful picture, blue sky, all of that. Except I said, I think there's a chance Xander Bogaerts won't be of the Red Sox when this book comes out. He's a free agent. They hadn't really shown any inclination to sign him. They made him a kind of a cursory offer that they knew he wasn't going to accept. And I said, I love this picture, but there's a chance that when the book comes out in March 2023, that Xander Bogaerts is playing somewhere else. And that's exactly what happened. He signed as a free agent with the San Diego Padres for about 3 times what the Red Sox offered him. So we kind of dodged one with that. And we came to use Koji on the cover for a couple of reasons. We liked that he had a very high approval rating as a player. When he came into a game, it felt like the game was over. He pitched the 9th inning as the closer, and it's always the highest tension inning in a tight playoff game, and he made it seem like a breeze. So a very well-regarded player here, even though he wasn't here that long. It's at Fenway Park, which was the first World Series they'd won at Fenway since 1918, the 2013 World Series. And just a really sharp photo. We thought of Fenway with the home white uniforms and a great look on his face. And we decided we don't need Ted or Poppy on this one because this is the ideal picture, and 10-year anniversary of them winning that World Series. So that's why we decided to go that way. And when I announced the book was coming out and posted it on Twitter and showed the cover, the first response I got was, why'd you put Koji on the cover? That's terrible. And haven't had one comment like that since. So the one guy got it out of the way right away. Everybody else seems pretty happy about it. Putting the book together, it's 432 pages, there's over 300 stories. And I often get asked, what are your favorite ones you put in there? For me, it was the stuff I grew up with, the 70s, the Carl Yastrzemski years, and then the 1975 World Series, and Fred Lynn and Jim Rice. And I think that's the way it is for everybody who picks up this book or looks at this book or thinks about their time as a Red Sox fan. They tend to gravitate toward the time when they were a kid and when they really cared about baseball and the Red Sox the most. And so the first reaction I think people have when they look at this book is to open it up and go to the stuff that was from the time when they really first fell in love with the team. And then the second thing that they do is go to the World Series stuff and skip those 86 years between World Series and just read about 2004 and 13 and 18 and 2007 when they won championships in a bunch after having to wait for such a long time. But I have a few stories in the book beyond beyond the ones from my era and my childhood that I really care about. One of the things I found out putting the book together was that the reporting was really high quality back at the beginning. I don't think a lot of people know this, but the Globe has been around about 40 years longer than the Red Sox have. It's not quite that long of a time, but somewhere in that window. And so the Globe was established when the Red Sox were a fledgling baseball team. And the way the Globe covered them from the beginning was as a really primary important beat, like covering politics or religion or anything else that the newspaper in the early 1900s would be covering. They covered the Red Sox immediately with the same passion. And there was one writer named Tim Renane, who he was so beloved when he covered as a Red Sox reporter, which was 1900s, 19-teens, and then he died around, let's say 1918, 1919. And when he died, over I think 8,000 people went to his funeral in Boston. He was that beloved, but he was a terrific writer. And one of the stories that really popped out to me as we were sorting through our archives, trying to figure out what to include, was one from 1907. There was a Red Sox manager named Chick Stahl, who had been a great player, and he was managing the team. And he was enduring some turmoil in his personal life. And when spring training of that year, 1907, he took some acid and killed himself during spring training, committed suicide. And obviously, it was enormously shocking, and the Globe covered it with massive headlines on the front page. And Tim Renane, the writer, got this incredible, extraordinary account of what exactly happened. He talked to his roommate. It was another former great Red Sox player named Jimmy Collins, who had been there when all of it went down. And he has these quotes about detailing the timeline of this guy's demise, which is just shocking to see from 1907. That kind of insight and connection with the team, and it's the kind of access that you wish you had nowadays, and he had then, because he was just such a trusted reporter. I get asked a lot too about Ted Williams, who is probably the most prominent figure in the book. I always say Ted Williams is the best player in Red Sox history. I think David Ortiz is the most important, because he got the hit that the other great superstars in Red Sox history never could. The guy who came through in the playoffs again and again and again, and even Ted, who played in one World Series with the Red Sox, couldn't do that. But one of the great discoveries in assembling the story of the Red Sox was realizing how many great stories we had on Ted Williams. We had Q&A with him from his second season, which is included in the book, where he talks about all his personal stuff that people don't think of Ted Williams talking about, his having a girlfriend and his mom and things like that. And it's just a great little time capsule to go back and see what Teddy Ballgame was like in the first couple of years of his career. He had a reputation for being really cantankerous with the media. That didn't necessarily extend to the Globe. Its bigger issue was a guy named Dave Egan, who worked at another newspaper. Ted did believe that a Globe reporter cost him the 1946 MVP award. It was one of those years, which later was proven not to be true. The guy didn't even have a vote for it, but Ted held a grudge in that regard. But going through our archives and realizing just the riches we had in Ted Williams coverage, we could have put twice as many stories in the book about him if we had the room, from his playing days and hitting .406 in 1941 to being a fighter pilot in 2 different wars, to being which John Glenn, the astronaut and former senator, referred to him as the only person who's ever been the best at 3 different things. Bobby Knight actually said that, the basketball coach, that Ted Williams is the only person who's ever been the best in the world at 3 different things: flying a plane, hitting a baseball, and fishing. So this could have been an entirely 75% Ted Williams in this book, which I think probably my dad would have liked. But there's so much just rich history and so many compelling personalities with the Red Sox through the years that you've got to have a lot from the '67 Impossible Dream Team and Yaz, and 1975 World Series when Peter Gammons was at the height of his powers as a Red Sox beat reporter, and then into the '80s, and then all the way up to this incredible stretch that they've had over the last 20 years. It doesn't really feel that way right now because the team is mediocre and feels like a long way from a championship, but it's really been a remarkable couple of decades here, with them winning in '04 and then again in '07 with a team that was sort of the ideal for how you want a Red Sox team to be built. It's superstars and holdovers from '04. And then players came up from the farm system, John Lester, Jonathan Papelbon, Dustin Pedroia, who really enhanced that '07 team. And Terry Francona, who's a manager of the first two Red Sox teams this century to win the World Series, said that was probably his best team, either '07 or '08, because it was just so well-rounded. The '08 team didn't win, but Francona was a big believer in that one too. So I don't know, those are my favorite stories, but still the ones that appeal to me the most were the ones from my childhood, from my generation. I grew up, the first team I cared about was '78, as I said before, and that season ended in heartbreak, losing a one-game playoff to the Yankees, but it was an incredibly compelling team. Just Jim Rice and Fred Lynn, Yaz, Dennis Eckersley, who wrote the foreword to the book, star after star. And the best writing in the book to me comes from as that era began to break apart, when Haywood Sullivan, who was the general manager of the team, traded Lynn and made a mistake that allowed Carlton Fisk to get away, and sort of watched a team that should have been the one to end that drought fall apart around the seams. So my favorite story in the book is one when Louis Tiant, who was a great pitcher on that team, signed with the Yankees, and Ray Fitzgerald, who's probably the most underrated little columnist of all time. He passed away young, but he was a phenomenal writer in the '70s and early '80s. He wrote about Tiant signing with the Yankees and how heartbreaking and crushing it was. And he ended his story by saying he wanted to go stick his head in an oven. That was sort of the feeling of the day, and it was probably the one that a lot of Red Sox fans could feel the same way about on that particular day. But those heartbreak days seem to be behind the Red Sox. This generation has been really lucky to have 4 teams that have won, and still a lot of hope ahead, even though this season might be mediocre at best right now. But so that's sort of how we put the book together, and some of the thought that went into it, and some of the joys of putting it together. And I'd love to open it up to questions if anybody has any.
We just need to grab the lavalier mic so we can run that around.
Sure.
The small mic?
The lavalier, because he needs the mic.
Okay, yeah,
Need this one or this one?
that one.
We have a ton of questions online, but you guys can ask whatever you want. Anybody?
Yeah, you can hear.
Kylie?
It's not on. Oops. There we go.
It doesn't seem that this current team has any particular stars. I mean, it seems very, I've gone to a couple of games, they just seem kind of flat and lackluster.
Yeah.
Is that something that you would agree with? And the second part is, do you think there's any possibility there'll be a change in that next season?
Yeah, that's a great question. I completely agree with it. I mean, they have Rafael Devers and they paid him, but he's not having a great year. And what you've seen over the last 3 or 4 years since Chaim Bloom became the essentially, he's not the general manager as his title, but he runs the operation and makes the decision, is that they've really sort of pulled away from having stars. And worse than that, they've misread, I think, how Boston fans feel about their team, where if you grew up as a Red Sox fan, you usually had a generational star that you cared about for more than a decade. It was Jim Rice when I was a kid, or Yaz, or Roger Clemens, Wade Boggs for a long time, players like that. And they traded Mookie Betts, and they really made no effort to keep Xander Bogaerts. And those two guys came up through the farm system and won a World Series here. In 2018, they cared about being here. And that there's a narrative with the Red Sox that Mookie didn't want to be here, and it's just not true. I mean, he was looking to buy a house. He was planning on staying. And I think they really undervalue this, not the ownership, but the people running the team on a day-to-day basis undervalue how much that generational connection matters to Red Sox fans, that they can have a player that they know is going to be here for a long time. And really, other than Devers and maybe Yoshida, that guy isn't on the roster right now.
Can I just ask you to use the mic when you
Oh, sure.
respond?
Yeah.
So somebody did ask here, why did they let go of Bogarts? Was it about money?
Yeah, that was a part of it. Should I hold this? Do you think
Yes,
this is
please. Yeah, just pull it off the.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was a couple of things. I think they thought he wasn't going to age very well into his 30s, that they'd seen a little bit of decline with him in terms of power already. Defensively, his metrics were good last year, but he wasn't always the Rangers shortstop, and they thought that would decline as he got older too. So they figured the money that he was going to command probably wouldn't be reciprocated with the production that they got from him, which is a completely soulless way of building a team. He wanted to stay. They made him a 4-year, $90 million offer, which was never going to be accepted in spring training last year, and then never really made much of an effort after that to keep him. So they made it pretty clear that they weren't bringing him back unless it was on their number, which is, he hasn't been great for the Padres, but you look at the issues of the Red Sox this season, and he would have helped with at least the shortstop, the play at shortstop, which has been a disaster.
When you were talking about the cover, did you ever consider Yaz, Jim Rice, Dwight Evans, or Carlton Fisk?
Ooh, yes, those are all good ones. You know what one we thought about actually was Fisk from the 75 World Series, but we found out that the photo everybody remembers wasn't our photo. It was Sports Illustrated. So if you look in the book, we have a photo of Fisk after he hit the winning home run in Game 6, but it's probably not one you're used to seeing, whereas the one that Sports Illustrated had is iconic. But yeah, we talked about that. I mean, I mentioned my biases towards the 60s, 70s, and 80s guys, so that would have been totally cool to me. But one of the things the publishers wanted was something more recent. They think that sells better if it's a more recent championship.
Oh, interesting. Did the 1997 movie Good Will Hunting get it right that Game 6 of the 1975 World Series was the greatest Red Sox moment up to that point?
I just watched that movie with my 16-year-old son, so and he loved it. So I got to say they did get it right. I'm not sure how familiar Robin Williams really was with Red Sox history, but I believe Matt Damon knew his stuff. So the baseball stuff in that movie is about as good as Hollywood gets it.
Cool. That's nice to know. So Lon asks, what stories were the most difficult to leave out?
Oh, boy. I mean, I've been kicking myself for certain things ever since we sent in the final draft of the book. I wish I'd gotten something in on Dick Raditz, who was a great closer in the 60s when their teams are really mediocre, but he was a larger than life figure and had some great battles with Mickey Mantle of the Yankees. And this is probably a feature in our archives on him that would have been good to put in. Another one was, I would like to have more in the book on Manny Ramirez. There's a lot on Ortiz and a lot from that era, but my colleague Stan Grossfeld, who is a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer and also writes features, 6 or 8 features a year, big profiles. He went on a car shopping trip with Manny Ramirez once, and Manny was kind of he was a quirky character, and he kind of kept to himself when it came to the media. But Stan has this real knack for getting people to open up to him. Everybody loves the guy. Bruce Springsteen, when he's in town, always looks up Stan because he loves some of the photos he shot of him through the years. So I wish I'd included that, and I know we'll have a paperback edition and probably at least one second printing of the hardcover here. And I'm hoping they let me squeeze in a couple of things that I just overlooked before.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
My question is, has more to do with the management,
Mhm.
and that I've been a long time Red Sox lover. And I'm losing my love, I'm losing my loyalty. And I believe other fans are also, because of, you know, they give away good players all the time. And do you think management recognizes that? That they're maybe losing the heart of the Red Sox?
Who was it that you were disappointed to see go?
Anyone good?
Yeah, guys have been here a long time,
Right.
the fans cared about, yeah. I think ownership understands, it's gonna be interesting to see how it goes for Hein Bloom. That runs baseball operations, because this is year 4. And they had very good 2021 season, but I think you could say it's probably the outlier and the fluke based on what's happened the other 3 seasons he's been here. They got lucky with some stuff, and there were 2 wins from getting the World Series, and that's great, but that wasn't a sustainable great team. It just was one that really had a fortunate season and a lot of things lined up. The way to be a sustained winner is to have a core group of players that have been here for a long time and hopefully grow up together and learn to win together. And they had that with Bogarts and Betts for sure, and moved on from both of them. We'll see if there's a loss in interest this year that results in people not watching NESN anymore, and the stands being empty again at the end of the year like they were last year. I remember the last game of the season last year was Dennis Eckersley's last game. They knew they might be saying goodbye to Bogarts, and nobody was there. The weather wasn't great. It was a rainy day, but still, that ballpark would have been packed in most seasons, and it wasn't. And I think that was pretty telling. And you know, the way John Henry's run this team, he can make changes abruptly. He did it when he fired Ben Sherrington and brought in Dave Dombrowski. He did it when he got rid of Dave Dombrowski a year after winning the World Series in 2018 with the best team the Red Sox have ever had. And if they sense that people like you don't care about the team as much as they did before, he will make a change. But we have no sense for how long that road is right now.
I have a little bit of a follow-up question to that from very similar from John, who says, do you think it's like a sort of chicken and egg thing where people are losing interest and so ticket sales are down and so there's not as much money so that they have to make changes and cuts and things like that?
No, I think it's, I guess it would be the chicken, right? Which is the fact that they had the players here and moved on from them because they felt like they needed to get their payroll under control, get below luxury tax level, and get out of danger of paying these enormous penalties for being over the luxury tax, which meant, by their calculations, it meant trading Mookie Betts because they weren't going to be able to trade Chris Sale's contract, and they had some other bad contracts. Nathan Eovaldi was considered to be a bad one at that time, but he really wasn't, and so they felt like they needed to trade Mookie because his contract was coming up, and he was perfectly willing to stay, but he was looking for his value, and they just didn't feel like they could pay that at that point in time with the salary issues they were having. So I think it's just the fact that they took money into consideration above all else, and because of that, they ended up moving on from a generational player. I mean, Mookie Betts should have been the guy who Yaz was to kids who grew up in the 60s, and Jim Rice was to kids who grew up in the 70s, and on and on. And they moved on from him and then lost Bogarts 2 years later. That's going to be a turn off to fans, and that's when you start seeing ticket sales go down and the ratings on NESN go down. And the way to bring them up is to win ball games and to have players that fans like. And right now, they have players that fans like, but they're not winning enough ball games.
Agreed. So do you think that the management is on the right path to fixing these issues, or are they do they need to do something different?
Yeah, I mean, there's good and bad. I mean, it still comes down to Bloom, and I'd say the good is he's found players that you weren't expecting them to, that maybe had been overlooked elsewhere. I mean, Masataka Yoshida, who they signed as a free agent the same day that Bogarts left from Japan, has been a wonderful pickup. And they were said to have overpaid for him when they signed him. And now you hear teams around baseball saying, oh, we would have paid that. We knew he could hit. We didn't think he was going to be good defensively, but we knew he could hit. So that's a plus in Bloom's favor. But then you look at the way the team is constructed sometimes, and you're always trying to patch together the starting rotation, and you fixed the bullpen this offseason, but it was a mess last year. And it seems like every year they have one glaring hole in their defense. This year it was at shortstop. Last year it was trying to play Franchi Cordero at first base. And it seems like for a guy who is supposed to be able to find low cost, helpful options, that he's really struggled to do that. And I don't think fans are really, the vast consensus of fans is not happy with the way that he builds a baseball team.
Do you include any stories about Ellis Burks in the book?
Oh, Ellis Burks, that's a good one. You know, there was a photo I wanted to get into him of him carrying the championship trophy off the plane after they won the 2004 World Series, because Ellis had been a spectacular Red Sox player when he came up in '87. They didn't have guys like him with speed and power combination who could play center field, but he had a back injury, and you know, management sort of soured on him unfairly, and he left after the '92 season. And then he came back in. He said at that point he was never going to play for the Red Sox again, and didn't like Boston. And frankly, he shouldn't have with the experience that he had. And then to have him back in '04, and he was hurt most of the season, but to have him be a part of the team that finally won, that felt like justice, and it felt really cool to see that and see him reconnect with the city again. So I don't think we have any specific stories about him, but he's involved in a lot of different things in the book.
Maybe for the next book.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites.
I know the book, well, Mark says that he knows the book is about the Red Sox, but did you have any coverage about the Boston Braves, especially in 1948, when they almost played each other in the World Series?
We did not, other than at the very beginning, because the Braves and Red Sox the Braves were in the National League, which was the established league when the Red Sox came around in 1901, and the American League launched as a challenger to the National League, and the National League disregarded it so much that one of the years they refused to even play a World Series because they thought the AL was the lesser league. And the Braves were established in Boston, and really the team that fans cared about for the first good part of the Red Sox existence. When the Braves changed uniforms, I think it was in 1907, 1908, somewhere around there. They changed their uniform color, and the Red Sox became the Red Sox at that point because they stole the Braves uniform color of the Red Sox and changed their name from the Americans. So that's one of their big connections throughout history. But the book was specifically about the Red Sox, so anything about the Braves in there is only ancillarily related to their history with the Sox.
Mm-hmm. What is the most surprising thing you learned while putting this book together?
Oh boy, the story about Chick Stahl there that I mentioned would be up there, the 1907 story. One thing that surprised me in a good way was in 1945, I believe the Red Sox had a sham workout for Jackie Robinson and some other Negro League players at Fenway Park, and they had no intention of signing them. There are some mixed reports, but it sounds like some racial slurs were thrown at them while they were on the field by somebody who's never identified, but who's believed to be someone in the Red Sox front office or even their owner. And still kind of unclear why they had the workout when they didn't intend to ever add them to the team. But the Globe covered it, and I wasn't sure if that would be in the Globe back then, but lo and behold, there was a 6-paragraph story about Robinson and these two other players working out at Fenway. And that was a pleasant surprise, because I felt like it was something that might have fallen through the cracks of history. The other thing that I kind of surprised me. The stories weren't really a surprise, but it was cool to see how things are perceived at the time compared to how they ultimately were perceived. Big one was when the Red Sox signed David Ortiz in 2003. He'd been released by the Minnesota Twins. He'd been a pretty good hitter for them. This was the wrong manager. Wanted to turn him into a singles hitter, but he'd been productive, but not a star by any means. And the Red Sox signed him, and the whole story in the Globe was not about signing David Ortiz, who had become one of the most fundamental figures in Red Sox history, but that they'd let Brian Dahlbeck go. That Ortiz is coming in, which means Dahlbeck's out of here. So we're mad about that. But I don't know if it's a spoiler, but it turned out to work out pretty well for the Red Sox.
I think we're aware of that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite game to cover?
Oh, boy. I've been really lucky because I've been a columnist officially for about 7 or 8 years, but I got to cover things as a general assignment reporter and an online writer from about 2007 on. So I got to cover a bunch of Super Bowls, Bruins winning the Stanley Cup in Vancouver, and the Red Sox championships other than 2004. Because I didn't have the outlet for it at that point in time, but I think it'd probably be 2013 and then winning the World Series at home and getting to get down and do the interviews on the field at Fenway Park after they won, because as great as the other championships were, winning 2004, that was in St. Louis, and 2007 they won that in Colorado. So to be there in 2013 for a team that really wasn't expected to be that good coming into the season, and then the marathon bombings happened, and Ortiz said what he said in his speech. It really bonded the team with the city in even a greater way than it ever had been before. It just became part of the fabric of the community, and to be able to cover the culmination of that with them really not having the best team in baseball, but just having complete belief in each other, and beating a Tigers team in the playoffs that was completely loaded, and then winning the World Series. That was pretty special. So I'd say covering the clincher that night was right up there.
I can only imagine. Gail asks, what's your take on the current reliance on metrics rather than traditional assessments of players' skills and value to the team?
Yeah, the Celtics, the Red Sox are very heavy into that. Bloom came from the Rays, which is probably the most successful organization in baseball in terms of implementing analytics. And Heim's first job in baseball was writing for Baseball Prospectus as an intern. So he has deep roots in that, and he's built the team that way, where they look at the data and they'll recognize a pitcher with a high spin rate on his curveball and say, we can fix this guy. And sometimes they can, and sometimes that guy ends up being Caleb Ork or somebody, and you never actually fix them. And I think the absolute ideal is a mixture, is using as much data as you feel like you need to use, and also talking to people with a good set of eyeballs and history in the game, scouts, ex-players, people whose opinions come from being around their games the entirety of their adult life. So, I think Theo Epstein realized this when he was building a team. He was kind of at the forefront of the analytics revolution, Billy Beane of the A's and Sandy Alderson of the A's and some others. But Theo also had Bill LaJoie in his front office, who had was a 80-something-year-old man at that point, who had built the 1984 Tigers World Series team. So Theo had his ears open to a lot of different people, and his eyes open to it too. And sometimes, most of the time, I feel like the current Red Sox brain trust will put data over everything else, and so far that hasn't worked for them.
When we talk metrics, it seems like the Sox were enamored with the A's success in the whole Moneyball thing.
Yeah,
I watched that movie and what struck me most was that nobody ever mentioned the pitching staff the A's had that year. Which was the real secret of their success. The Sox have always been known for having the best pitcher in baseball, no matter how bad they are. And they haven't seemed to try for that anymore. I was wondering if that's ever gonna come back.
yeah, that's a great point. Both of those points are, you watch Moneyball and you might hear one mention of Tim Hudson maybe, but yeah, that team was Hudson, Mulder and Zito, and you also look at that movie and so much was framed around Scott Hatterberg, who they traded Carlos Pena to keep, and Carlos Pena was probably the better player. So a little bit of fiction there. I love the movie too. I love the book, but it's not exactly, doesn't exactly track now the way that it did then, as numbers above all else. The ace thing with the Red Sox, I mean, it's a good point. They went from Clemens to Steve Avery and then Pedro. And showing, put him over the hump in 04 and gave him this Pedro started to fade, gave them another true ace. And Dave Dombrowski certainly tried to build the team that way, trading for Sale and signing David Price to a big free agent contract. I don't know what Bloom thinks about the front of the rotation, whether he believes guys like Brian Bayo and Garrett Whitlock will develop into that, whether once some of this money is off the books that they will compete for free agents that could front a rotation. If a Spencer Strider or somebody like that ever became a free agent, whether they'd be involved with that. But certainly seems to me like an absolute necessity. If you're really going to compete for championships, you have to have that person at the front of your rotation. Even 07, Schilling, Josh Beckett was phenomenal that year. John Lester was coming into the zone. And you just look now and you have a couple of good young pitchers, but everything else is patchwork, and that's kind of how it's been since Bloom has been here.
So yeah, we have about 10 more minutes for questions. So keep thinking, everybody, keep thinking. This question comes from Thomas, and I have the same one. Our kiddos have not been to their first MLB game yet. What's your favorite concession at Fenway?
The beer, what else?
I think that will work for the kids.
I usually get the Papagino's pizza, so I'm probably not the best person asking that. My kids always would get the ice cream helmet, get the batting helmet this Sunday in it. I don't think you can go wrong with that. But I haven't been to concessions this year. I don't know if they've added anything new. We get our little meal up in the press box, like a fish sandwich or something, and that's generally what we deal with. So hopefully it's better this year because they need some distractions. Good food would be a distraction.
Yeah, well, according to how it's going, it sounds like you might need it. What are your thoughts on the extra inning man on second base rule?
Does anybody like that? I mean, it feels so out of place. It certainly keeps you from being there for a 17 inning game or something like that. But it's just weird to me, like when you would look at a box score and guy scores a run, but you don't really know how he got on base. It's just he's suddenly there. I never really liked it. I understand that they were looking for ways to shorten up the games and to make them more appealing to fans. I think they're much of the changes they made this year are almost all good for the game. The pitch clock has really helped condense the game into a lot more action. People stealing bases again with the changes they made there. They're mostly good, but I think the best thing baseball could do in order to, and they never will, but the best thing baseball could do to really bring fans back and build these long-term relationships with the fans is to have the games on earlier. And they're just so adamant about having them in prime time and World Series games starting at 8:30 at night. That's doing nobody any favors except for the people cashing checks.
Mm-hmm. So John asked, and this sort of goes to something you had just asked, with the situation with Chris Sale spending more time on the injured list and actually playing games in the past 3 years, what are your thoughts on signing pitchers to long-term contracts?
Yeah, I think you have to still, if you have the resources, you're the Red Sox. I mean, you can afford it. Just spend your money wisely. This high risk with pitchers. But they traded for Pedro Martinez in late 1997 after he had won the Cy Young Award for the Montreal Expos, which used to be a team and should be again. And they used him a ton that year. He pitched 10 complete games, and the Red Sox traded for him and signed him immediately and never had a regret about it. So you can go out and get top of the line pitchers and pay them. You have to cross your fingers that nothing's going to happen, because pitching is a violent action. That's not natural. But to be a team that hangs up championship banners, you have to have those guys at the front of the rotation. I mean, you look at the people that helped them win World Series. Josh Beckett's medicals were horrible when they traded for him in 2005. And there are people in the organization who didn't want to make the trade, and they did. And he was their ace in 2007 when they won the World Series and finished second in the Cy Young voting. You have to take the risk, and the Red Sox can afford that. So I don't fault them for making the Chris Sale trade. He was fantastic when he got here. It was kind of broke down, but he got the last out in the 2018 World Series, and kind of feel bad for him now. I mean, he's got tens of millions of dollars coming his way, but he's a guy who really cares and would give a lot to be back out there on the mound. So you have to try to get people like that, even with the inherent risk of getting any pitcher and committing a lot of money to them.
Mm-hmm. This is a little out of left field. Sandra asks, what's your opinion on the current Red Sox NESN announcing team?
Well, it's all over the map. It's certainly a downgrade from even the end of the pandemic year in 2020, when the end of the season, nobody was really paying attention to the games for understandable reason. And it was essentially Jerry Remy and Dennis Eckersley telling stories, and it was fantastic. And Jerry passed away, and Eck retired after last season, and they weren't they knew Jerry was sick, and they probably wouldn't be doing the job much longer. But they were kind of blindsided, I think, by Eck's decision to retire, and they kind of had to patch it together. They really did last year too. Eck did 75 games last year, and it was Kevin Youkilis doing a bunch, and Tony Maserati for a year, and Youkilis working some other guys into the booth. The person I hear the most compliments about is Uke. I think he talks too much and needs to tone that down a little bit, but that's understandable. He's relatively new to it still. He's got a good sense of humor. He understands what he's seeing and relays that pretty well to the viewer. I think he'll get better. My favorite guy, the one I think has a bright future, is Will Middlebrooks. He's done stuff for CBS for the last couple of years after his playing career ended because of an injury, and he has very self-deprecating sense of humor. He's still really well connected to the current players. I mean, he played in Arizona Fall League when he was a prospect with Bryce Harper and Mike Trout. He knows everybody around baseball, and I think he's going to get better and better at this. NESN seems to think that they can kind of rotate guys in, and the fan base is fine with that. I think they should settle on one or two people like they had with Jerry and Eck, and just go with them and allow them to build up that camaraderie, the sense that you have a friend in your living room every night when you're watching the game that you had with Jerry, especially with Don Orsillo, and then with Eck later on. And none of these guys have that yet.
They're working on it. Why does NESN go to commercial the split second the third out is made?
Got to cram them all in. One of these, I cover media too, and one thing I've meant to do is document all the reads they do during a game. I haven't done it yet, but the ad reads they do during Dave O'Brien has to do during the action, and then how many commercials they cram into a break. And they've knocked that 2 seconds off the end of an inning where he tells you the score before they go to a break, and that's annoying enough. But what's really annoying is when they come back and you've missed a pitch.
Right.
And that's happened a lot for over the past 2 years, and it's just because they've got this clock up at the ballpark that you see of how long the break is, and they try to squeeze in that one little extra 20-second commercial, and sometimes you miss stuff. So basically it's trying to get as much money as they can at the expense of the enjoyment of the viewer.
So this is an interesting comment that Leslie has. because there was a lot of comments about Ted Williams, how awesome he is or was, that her dad was on this webinar. It was Ted Williams's neighbor and he mowed his lawn.
He mowed Ted's lawn? and
Yeah.
he mowed his-
No, he
That
mowed
makes
Ted's
sense.
lawn. So small world, everybody's.
Tip, did you pay him or you? Pro bono?
I will wait to see if she responds to that.
Well, that's great. I mean, I feel like everybody of a certain generation in New England has a Ted Williams story. Like my dad's 83. And he always says, I saw him at the Muddy Rudder in Freeport one time, and I've heard that story 500 times in my life, but
If you
you
spent a
run
lot of
into
time,
Ted Williams, you gotta remember it, right?
well, maybe he spent a lot of time at the Muddy River.
Probably.
or-
Muddy Rudder.
Muddy Rudder. Okay, obviously I'm not a huge baseball aficionado. So Leslie says, they're not sure that Ted paid all that well. But we'll keep that amongst all ourselves and anybody who's on
You
YouTube.
get a
because
great story out of it, that's worth something too.
that is true. So we're about out of time, and I did want to ask you, what is your next book? What can we look forward to from you?
Well, I'm gonna do a Celtics one, very similar, which is a kind of a different undertaking because they have 50 fewer years of history than the Red Sox do. So we're trying to figure out how to structure that, whether it's whether it's framed more around personalities or whether it's a chronological book like this is. But one thing I know is there'll be a lot of Larry Bird in there, and I'll fight to get him on the cover too, if not Bill Russell. So we'll see how that goes. So they'll probably want to put for sale on that cover too.
Well, we'll be looking forward to it. Do you have any idea of when that might be coming out, or you're just starting?
2024, yeah. My deadline's way ahead of when the book actually comes out. That's annoying. But I guess it gives us time to clean up typos or something, right? But
That's what librarians would say, yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm actually gonna come in front of the camera. Thank you. It's been so interesting, and for all of your questions and thoughts, and for those online who had a few more questions that that are pretty fascinating as well. So I'm going to end the webinar for people online, but for people in the room, you are more than welcome to buy the book from Andrew at Aesop's Fable and then come up here and have it signed. So thank you all again for being here, and Chad for that amazingly interesting conversation.
Oh, good. Yeah, thanks. It was a lot of fun.
We are.
How are you? Was that a table?
Yes.
They are. That was a great question. Yeah.